evidence, a judge that would decide your guilt or innocence. At either of those trials, through your attorneys, you would have the right to confront and cross-examine each and every witness called against you. You would have to call witnesses on your own behalf if you wanted to, and you'd have the right to testify at that trial, but only if you wanted to. Nobody could force you or make you testify at trial. But by entering into this negotiated plea today, you are waiving or giving up some of your rights. And that means, for example, the trial that we were getting ready to start today would not take place, and you will be waiving some of those rights. Do you understand that? On the charge of murder, the range of penalties are: you could be sentenced to the Illinois Department of Corrections for a term of 20 to 60 years, 60 to 100 if the court were to find extended or aggravated circumstances existed. It's also possible you could receive life if the court were to find that this was exceptionally brutal and heinous. It is a non-probationable offense. You must serve every day of any sentence handed down on the charge of murder. That's truth in sentencing. And you must serve a mandatory supervised release period, they used to call that parole, of 3 years. On the charge of armed robbery, the range of penalties are: you could be sentenced to the Illinois Department of Corrections for a term of 6 to 30 years, 30 to 60 extended if you had a prior Class X or greater felony conviction in the last 10 years. Upon release from prison, you would be subject to a mandatory supervised release period of 18 months in this particular case. It is non-probationable as charged, as is the charge of first-degree murder, which is non-probationable. You could receive a fine on each of those charges of up to $25,000. Do you understand the range of penalties? Could I have a factual basis, please?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, if we were to proceed to trial on the charges that this defendant is pleading guilty to, the state would anticipate that the evidence would show as follows. On January 4th of 2020, around 11 a.m., the Madison County Sheriff's Office was dispatched to the area of 1143 Prickett Avenue in Edwardsville in Madison County, Illinois. The purpose was due to the property owner finding an abandoned vehicle on the property. The vehicle was a black Ford F-150 truck. The license plates were found to have been removed from the vehicle and placed inside the vehicle. Inside the vehicle was found a hard copy printout from a Google Maps search with the address of 1143 Prickett Avenue in Edwardsville, Illinois. The registered owner of the vehicle was determined to be Timothy Banowetz, and he could not be located in the area. The property owner of 1143 Prickett Avenue in Edwardsville, Illinois, was not aware or did not have any association to Timothy Banowetz, the registered owner of that vehicle. Footprints from the vehicle led into a northeast direction from the suspect vehicle. On January 4th of 2020, around 8:56 p.m., the Madison County Sheriff's Office responded to a 911 call to the address of 4586 Mooney Creek Road in Edwardsville, Madison County, Illinois. Upon arrival, they discovered the body of a deceased male who was subsequently pronounced dead at the scene. He appeared to have his throat slit open and to have suffered from multiple stab wounds. His hands were bound behind his back with zip ties. The deceased male was identified as Randy Gori, who was 47 years of age at the time and resided at that address. A vehicle described as a black 2020 Rolls-Royce SUV Cullinan was taken from the residence. This residence is approximately 2,900 feet from where the black Ford F-150 truck registered to Timothy Banowetz, the defendant in this case, was found. Randy Gori's juvenile children, a 15-year-old minor child with initials EG and a 13-year-old minor child with initials GG, were held captive by the male suspect during the incident, and they were located by first responders with their hands zip-tied behind their backs as well. The juvenile children subsequently gave audio-video recorded statements to a trained forensic interviewer at the Madison County Child Advocacy Center during the early morning hours of January 5th of 2020. During their interviews, they stated that when they returned home from dinner on the evening of January 4th, 2020, they parked in the driveway outside their garage and got out of their vehicle. At that time, the suspect ran up on them and their father with what he represented to be a gun. He forced them all to the ground and bound their hands behind their backs with zip ties. He then made them go inside their residence through the garage and kept them bound on the ground while he demanded United States currency and searched the house for money. The suspect took all of their cell phones from them and their father's wallet as well. He got around between $4,000 and $5,000 from the kitchen. The suspect then fled the residence in their father's vehicle, being that 2020 Rolls-Royce vehicle previously described. The suspect was described by the children as being a Caucasian male, over 6 feet tall, brown eyes, and a youngish sounding voice. He was described as having a handgun, which EG believed to be a fake gun, and he had a military-style knife with a black handle. The residence had exterior video surveillance, which depicts the suspect rapidly approaching the victims upon their arrival at the residence. The suspect is shown holding what appears to be a handgun in one hand and possibly the knife in the other. The suspect forces the victims to the ground and then directs them inside the residence. On the morning of January 5th, 2020, while Major Case Squad was investigating and searching the area where the defendant's black truck had been found, Timothy Banowetz approaches the officer stating that he is looking for his vehicle. That vehicle had been towed earlier that day. Shortly thereafter, the 2020 Rolls-Royce Cullinan belonging to Randy Gori was found abandoned alongside Zika Lane in Edwardsville, approximately about 1,000 feet from where Timothy Banowetz's vehicle was located in the woods. Banowetz was arrested, and he had what appeared to be blood stains on his clothing. The blood on his clothing was later confirmed by the Illinois State Police Crime Lab to be that of Randy Gori. He was also wearing shoes that appeared to match those of the suspect captured on the video surveillance. Furthermore, he had in his possession over $4,000 in United States currency, and he had a handwritten piece of paper that appeared consistent with the preparation and planning of the armed robberies and the murder in this case. The list included the following: watch with binoculars from woods, use gun and knife to subdue, zip tie hands and duct tape mouth, have withdraw 4 to 6 million from bank, kill all of them and take zip ties and duct tape off, burn bodies and house. Furthermore, Your Honor, the evidence at trial would show that in the months leading up to the murder, this defendant had used his computer to research Randy Gori via the internet and to plan the armed robbery and murder.
Ms. Copeland, do you stipulate that that would be substantially the evidence that the state could produce at trial should this case proceed to trial?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Banowetz, has anybody forced you or threatened you to get you to enter into this plea today? Has anyone made any promises to you other than the negotiations which were stated on the record to get you to enter into this plea today? Are you doing this freely and voluntarily? Have you had a chance to talk about this plea and the consequences of pleading guilty with your attorney? Knowing now what your rights are, knowing now what the range penalties are, knowing that I'm going to bind myself to the limited negotiations that have been had in this case and dismiss the counts that were agreed to be dismissed and to cap the case as agreed, do you still wish to enter into your plea of guilty today? The court would make the following findings. The court finds that Mr. Banowetz understands the nature of the charges against him. He understands the rights that he has, that he's making a knowing and voluntary waiver of his rights. The court finds that he understands the range of penalties that exist for these offenses. The court finds that there is a sufficient basis in fact to enter into a plea of guilty. The court will enter a finding of guilt and a judgment of that finding on count 1, first-degree murder, on count 5, armed robbery, and on count 6, armed robbery. The court is ordering that a pre-sentence investigation be prepared by the probation department, and upon receipt of that pre-sentence investigation, the court will set this matter for a sentencing hearing, wherein at that time the state will be allowed to present evidence in aggravation, the defense will be allowed to present evidence in mitigation. Mr. Banowetz will be given the right to make a statement in allocution if he wishes, although he is not required to. The victims will be allowed to make victim impact statements if they wish to, although they are not required to. And after all of that, the court will then sentence Mr. Banowetz in accordance with the agreements between the parties. For the record, this court had played no part in any of the negotiations in this case. Is there anything else that I need to put on the record at this time, Mr. Harlow?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Copeland?
No, Your Honor.
Pre-sentence investigation is to be prepared, and the court will set the matter for sentencing upon receipt. Thank you.
Thank you.